The wedding was in 3 days, so Jane had her last dress fitting that day. The woman was simply over the moon because very soon she would be the legal wife of the best man in the world. And just some 6 months ago, it seemed that Jane's life was one continuous train wreck. Her ex-boyfriend, whom she knew from back when they studied together in the village school, suddenly broke up with her. Some people said that he decided to enlist in the army. The woman was ready to follow him to the ends of the world, but he said he didn't have time for a relationship. He never called or sent letters. Jane was hurt, but then she met Lucas. They met at the cafe where Jane worked as a waitress. Lucas asked her out and Jane felt it was fate because the young man was very courteous. Lucas worked as a manager in a large company, so he could afford to take Jane out to restaurants and give her expensive gifts. One day, Jane brought her fiancé to meet her family. Her mother and grandmother welcomed the guest warmly, while Lucas was emphatically polite and hurried off back to the city the next day, claiming to have some urgent business he had to take care of. The young woman decided that her beloved was simply uncomfortable in the village, as he wasn't used to that kind of life. The man also introduced Jane to his mother. Mrs. Bella wasn't young anymore, but she always thought of herself as the city elite. To be honest, Jane wasn't the kind of woman she hoped her son would marry. And when she found out that Jane grew up without a father, and all she could bring to the family were her mother and sick grandmother, the woman got even more upset. "Okay, son, I'm not the one who has to live with her," Mrs. Bella sighed. "Don't worry, Mom," Lucas reassured her. "Jane is a good woman and she's so beautiful I'll never have to blush for her." And so the wedding planning began. Choosing the restaurant, the outfits, getting the photographer. The groom's mother took care of the guest list. Unfortunately, she didn't want to see Jane's village relatives at the celebration. "Honey, you have to understand," Mrs. Bella urged her future daughter-in-law. "And why should your mother take such a long trip? We'll celebrate here and then you'll go visit your mom with Lucas and you can celebrate there too. You can invite all your relatives then so that no one would be offended. I mean, we can't invite everyone to come here." "No, we won't invite everyone, but we could invite my mother at least," Jane objected timidly. "It's an important event after all." "What's so important about it?" "It's more trouble than it's fun," the woman shook her head. "Your mother won't feel comfortable here because our guests are from high society. She'll just feel out of place." Jane was at a loss. She understood that it wasn't right, but Lucas didn't take her side, although he did try to support her. "Honey, what are you so worried about? We'll have a huge celebration in your village, the kind they'll talk about for at least a year afterwards," Lucas assured his fiancée. Jane mustered up the courage and called her mom to explain the situation. She was very understanding, and Jane was very grateful for that. The young woman even seemed to calm down a bit, feeling that the difficult situation was resolved. However, Jane's mother felt rather uneasy after that conversation. The woman immediately realized that her daughter was getting involved with a difficult family. Maybe it isn't so bad. At least Jane will live in the big city and she'll get to make important connections. That's good, I guess. Jane's mother tried to persuade herself. Although it would have been so nice if she married Tom. He's a simple local man. Despite all the issues, Jane was still very excited about the upcoming celebration. Unfortunately, there were other things that made the woman feel uneasy, but she hoped that she could fix them over time. For example, when she went to a restaurant with Lucas one day, they were approached by a boy of about 10 years old. He was dirty and his clothes were old. "Sir, can you spare some change so I could get some food?" The child held out his hand. "Get away from me," Lucas replied rudely and pushed the boy. These beggars are so rude, badgering people at the entrance to an expensive restaurant. "Where's security? Why aren't they doing their job?" "Why are you being so mean?" Jane asked reproachfully and turned to the boy who was standing aside, his eyes full of tears. "Sorry, kid. Are you hungry? Here, take this." The woman took out her wallet and handed the boy a couple of bills. "Why are you being so gullible?" her fiancé reprimanded Jane. "He's obviously going to take this money to his alcoholic mother." "Why do you think so?" Jane objected. "Maybe the kid really is hungry." "Hungry?" Lucas chuckled. "Annoying is more like it. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not worried about the money. But isn't the state supposed to take care of the homeless and the poor?" "But we don't know his situation," the woman answered. This conversation was upsetting Jane, and the situation as a whole deeply unsettled the young woman. Although Lucas was wrong, the woman decided that it must have been his job that made him a little callous and indifferent. And his mother probably didn't give him as much love and affection as she should have. so Jane was hoping that she could thaw Lucas's heart with her kindness. She truly believed that Lucas was a good man, only tired of all the responsibility at his job. And then the wedding day came. The ceremony, the guests, the restaurant, everyone admired the first dance and didn't even notice the appearance of a new guest at the celebration. It was a little girl of about 8 years. She was poorly dressed and walked around with the help of a guide cane. "Are you looking for someone?" The host was the first one to notice the girl, so he approached her while the guests were busy watching the newlyweds. "I'm here to see my father and mother," the girl said quietly. "Where are they?" The host was surprised and a bit taken aback since the girl was blind. Then the girl asked to address her parents on the microphone. Thus, as soon as the dance was over, the little girl touched the microphone with a trembling hand and said, "Daddy, I found out that you're getting married today, so I'll have a new mother. I hope you two will always be happy together." A deathly silence filled the restaurant. Lucas just stood there as if struck by lightning. Then he suddenly jumped up and ran up to the child. He grabbed her by the hand and pulled her towards the exit. "Why did you come here? Who brought you here?" he screamed at her. "I did," an elderly, modestly dressed woman replied, entering the restaurant. "Did you think you could get away with what you did? Did you think you could just dance here and have fun with your new wife while your daughter is starving and has nowhere to live? Are you insane?" The groom was outraged. "Get out of here! Where's security?" "Aunt Susan," the girl murmured and clung to the woman. "Let's go. I told you it was a bad idea." "No, it wasn't, dear." The woman stroked the girl on the head. "At least now the guests will know what an awful man your father is. Especially his new wife. She needs to know what she's getting herself into," the woman said before taking the girl by the hand and leaving the restaurant. The guests were shocked, and Jane couldn't utter a single word. She didn't want to believe that it wasn't some kind of a bad dream and that Lucas really did have a daughter. Having finally pulled herself together, the young woman approached her husband, demanding an explanation. "It was a misunderstanding." He gritted his teeth and then addressed the guests. "Friends, those people made a mistake and came to the wrong wedding. Let's continue with the celebration." The guests quickly got back to having fun, forgetting all about the incident. However, the bride's mood was completely ruined. The little girl, thin as a twig, with a pale face and eyes looking somewhere into the unknown, stood before her eyes. When the couple went out into the hallway, Lucas finally decided to confess. He said that a few years ago he met a woman named Audrey, and she got pregnant. "You have to understand, I never wanted this child," Lucas tried to justify himself. "I offered to pay for an abortion, but Audrey insisted on having the baby. And then Carolyn was born, and it turned out that she was blind and there was nothing that could be done about it. I didn't need any of these problems in my life." "So you just abandoned your child?" Jane was shocked by what she was hearing. "What was I supposed to do, spend my life with a woman I didn't love and a disabled child I didn't want?" Lucas was angry that his new wife didn't understand him. "Yes, I stopped seeing them. And then that fool threw herself under a car thinking I would blame myself for it. But I have my own life and it was her decision to have that child. So let the girl's aunt take care of her for now." Jane pretended that everything was fine for the rest of the night, but she was restless. The woman decided that she had to fix the situation. The day after the wedding, she started the difficult conversation with her husband and offered to adopt Carolyn. But Lucas was unwavering. He continued to assert that he would never accept or love the disabled girl. Further persuasion was pointless. With every passing minute, Jane grew only more convinced she had made a huge mistake, so she decided to file for divorce. The woman returned to her rented apartment, and shortly after that she ran into her first love, Tom, in a store near the house. It turned out that he lived nearby. Surprisingly, they got along well and enjoyed talking to each other. Tom said that he bought an apartment and was a military man and his life was going well. "The only problem is that I miss you," he said bluntly. "Jane, please forgive me. I deliberately broke off our relationship so that you wouldn't have to put your life on hold and wait for me, but could move on instead." "You're a fool, Tom, you know that?" the woman almost screamed. "I thought that you didn't love me anymore. I've made so many mistakes while we were apart." "It's okay, honey. We can fix them as long as we're together," the man smiled, proposing to the woman right on the spot. It's been 3 years since they got married. Jane's mother was right. Her daughter found true happiness with Tom. By the way, Jane turned to social services and managed to find Carolyn in the huge city. At first, she simply started spending time with the girl. But then the young couple decided to adopt her. Thanks to their love and care, the child blossomed. She turned into a beautiful and cheerful girl who didn't even remember her biological father because now she had Jane for a mother and Tom for a father, and they loved her more than words could say.